Well, welcome to the uh, March meeting for North Georgia Photography Club. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I know we made it easy this month. We're all on Zoom. So we're going to mention that this will be probably the last time we mention membership renewal. $20 for individuals, $30 for families. We've kind of been over it. It allows you to attend club field trips and workshops, participate in photo reviews in our monthly meeting. That'll be next month. We're doing that. And it gives you access to our members only Facebook group. So if you haven't renewed your membership, I would encourage you to go do that. Um, the meeting location, as we kind of alluded to earlier, we are still trying to figure out a new meeting location. One that we can get a little better internet service, a little better presentation service. But we haven't made any decisions yet. So April we'll be back at the Bowen. We'll be in person and on Zoom. I'm going to let Rick talk about the upcoming field trips because we have one coming up in April. That's our big out of town field trip for the year. So Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you for a moment.
Yes, sir. So the Florida field trip, the annual, what we call extended field trip to Florida, April 24th through 27th. 24th is really drive down, 27th is really drive home. So it's a Friday and Saturday. Sweetwater Wetlands Park and Paynes Prairie. Last 2 years we did trips in Florida to different places for birding, and so far we haven't found a place yet that's disappointing. If you go at the right time of year, you're going to find birds in pretty much any of these places. But our friend Janine Haymaker, who's a member of the Cobb Photo Society, spent a lot of time in Gainesville, and she knew about these locations and really helped me put this trip together. So pretty excited. We've got, I think, 17 people signed up for it up to now, and plus myself. So I'm pretty excited about the group size for an extended trip like that.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
awesome.
we had a plan for this past weekend to do Stone Mountain with Larry Winslet. There it is right there, the reschedule. Um, Unfortunately, Mother Nature wasn't being very cooperative. And even though his concern was more about rain and the slippery rocks that you'd be walking around on and lightning strikes, which is fair concern at the top of Stone Mountain, it probably would have sucked even if it hadn't rained because it was windy all day. And if you're trying to photograph flowers, if you've ever gone on a trip where you're trying to photograph wildflowers, a lot of wind is not your friend. So rescheduling to May 3rd, obviously the flowers we'll actually see will be different. We're not going to have diamorpha, for instance, which is shown in that photograph to the right there, that red stuff on the ground. But Larry will make it an interesting trip, and Larry knows Stone Mountain better than anybody else. He can take us around and show us the secret hiding places up there. It should be a good time. And then I'll wrap up with the actual plan for May trip, which is Providence Canyon. It's really two trips. We're going to go to Providence in the morning, and you can see if you've never been there before, it is just a really eye-catching, bizarre feature. I'd love to call it a natural feature, but it isn't. It was actually created by bad farming practices back in the 1800s. But it is a canyon. You can shoot from above like that photo. You can get down into the canyon, and there's a lot of cool detail shots down there. And then what's going to happen is we're going to head back up to Columbus, which is north of there. So we're kind of on our way back home. We'll have lunch in Columbus, and then we'll photograph crazy people hitting white water in downtown Columbus. Because as far as I know, it's the only city in the country that has white water literally running through town. The Chattahoochee has some rapids on the north end of the town. You can walk to it from the central park, Woodruff Park, I think it's called, which is right on the river. And that's about where we're going to be having lunch. So we've got everything from landscape to action. You know, you've got rafters and kayakers and stuff coming down the river. So that'll be fun for the afternoon, and then drive home from there. I will tell
Awesome.
you that Joe Corberic, who's on with us tonight, I see, is going to be leading a waterfall trip in June for us. I think we know the date already, but we don't have details yet, so you'll see that when I send them out. These three that I've mentioned have already been announced, so if anybody's missed the announcement and you're interested, reach out to me directly and I'll send you the link.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rick.
Yes, sir.
Uh, Next month, we will be doing a photo review again. The guest judge we have coming in will be Mark Green. He's a North Georgia resident and longtime professional photographer who's been working in professional photography for a very long time, back in the film days. He's got a great portfolio. He's going to be doing our photo review for us, and our theme will be seasons, which leads me to my next slide, if it'll come up here. We have gone through and picked our themes for the photo reviews for the year. The board has kind of reviewed it. And so we did, in January, we did best of 2024. In April, we're going to do seasons. And as you saw on the previous image, that anything related to the seasons, whether it's winter, fall, whatever, it's pretty open to interpretation. And I'm hoping that we'll get a lot of creative stuff out of that. In June, we're going to do black and white. In August, we're going to do architecture. In October, we're going to be doing Georgia only. That will follow a presentation that I have lined up with Tom Wilson doing his favorite places to photograph in Georgia presentation. And then in November, we'll do reflections. And I spelled that wrong. See, I went to art school, so spelling is not my strong suit. So I apologize. I'll get that fixed going forward. But we will get these posted on the members Facebook group because you do have to be a member to participate in the photo review. I know in January we had 25 or 26 people submit images for review, and it was so far all the feedback I've gotten is that everyone really enjoyed that. So going forward, next month will be photo review only, and the topic will be seasons. And then tonight, we have a guest presentation. Mike Moats, who's already on with us, is going to be talking to us about the properly equipped macro photographer. And I'm really looking forward to this. I've never had a chance to hear Mike give a presentation, and I've always wanted to. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn it over to him, and he can tell us about himself and then get his presentation started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. He is the professional.
Done this
That's right.
hundreds of times.
Unlike the rest of us.
Yeah, I can't spell things, so.
All right, so I have made my living doing this for 21 years, and you are going to hear some things tonight that are going to be a little strange, and you're probably going to scratch your head, but I'll explain it all and show you how it's worked for me. I'm going to start off with the equipment that I use. About 2 years ago, I decided to go to the mirrorless system, and it was mainly because about 60% of the people that were coming in my workshops were using mirrorless cameras, and they were asking me questions about those cameras, and I'd go, you know what, I'm not familiar with them yet, so I figured I better probably pick up one and start getting, a little bit more knowledge about the mirrorless systems. Now, one thing that I've always done over this 21 years that I've been doing this as a business and teaching workshops all over the country is I would see a good majority of people in my workshops using cameras that were in that $1,000, under $1,000 price range. And Bill Fortney, who a lot of you probably have heard of or know, worked for Nikon about 10 years. And I ran into Bill at a conference that I was speaking at. And he says, Mike, he says, I know you're using our D7000 camera body. He said, and it's a good body, but he says, how come you're not using the professional cameras we use? I says, Bill, I says, if I'm using your $6,500 camera, I says, those people that are using those $1,000 or less cameras in my workshops are going to say, well, Mike's got great images because he's got an expensive professional camera. I've got a camera that's $1,000. I'm not going to get images as good as Mike does. So all the cameras I've owned over the years have been around that $1,000 price range or less. So when I was looking to pick up the mirrorless, I went with Fuji only because Tamron, who's one of my sponsors, only offered lenses at the time for Sony and Fuji. And I don't have any preference to any brand of camera. I think they're all good. But I like the setup of the Fuji as far as the dials on the top and all that, and that's why I ended up with Fuji. But I called Gary over at Hunt's Photo and I said, Gary, what do you got in a Fuji mirrorless camera around $1,000? He says, we have an XT30 Mark II, $899. I says, well, ship one out to me. So I've always tried to maintain my cameras in that price range, and it's really just to point out to people in my workshops that you don't need an expensive camera for macro close-up photography. And a lot of those people that have those lower price cameras appreciate hearing that and seeing that. So as far as, you know, anything I buy in the future will always be in that lower price range. And again, just to show people that you don't need an expensive camera for this. Now, one thing I like about the mirrorless system, like most people that get into it, is it's lightweight. It's half the size of my DSLR. That's a 7500 Nikon there. And I do like the smaller, more compact system, easier to work with, I think, instead of using my D7500, which feels like a tank now since I got the mirrorless camera. Lenses, as you can see, are about the same size because the sensor in both of those cameras is the same size sensor. It's a C sensor. So you still need a lens of a certain size to produce the image on those sensors. Now, people that use in Panasonic systems and Olympus systems, they have the micro four thirds sensor, I guess, and it's a smaller sensor, so they get away with much smaller lenses than we do. But other than that, you know, all the, you know, Fujis and Nikons, Sonys, Canons, all those have the larger sensors in them, and you're going to still have a fairly decent sized lens to go with that smaller body. Now, in the macro lenses, they come in short focal length, mid-range, and long telephoto ranges. And these are the lenses that I would see in my workshops from DSLR people for many, many years. There are a few focal length macro lenses in between some of these numbers, but they're very rare and I hardly ever see them. These are the ones I always saw on a regular basis. Now, in the short focal length 60 millimeter, that's a Tamron, Nikon, Canon. Sigma was a 50 millimeter. They didn't have a 60, they used a 50 millimeter. In the mid range, on the low end, is the Tamron 90, which I used, and the 100 millimeter is the Canon, and the 105 is the Sigma and Nikon. And then the telephoto macro lenses on the low end would be the 150 from Sigma, and the 180 was always the most popular of the telephoto macro lenses, and that was offered up by Tamron, Sigma, Canon, and then the true 200 millimeter is the Nikon, and that is the longest of the true macro lenses that's available. Now, a few years ago, Tamron contacted me. He says, we are not selling any more macro lenses for DSLR. They have literally discontinued them all. And I was quite shocked. I thought, really? Not even the 90 you're going to keep? Nope, discontinuing all of them. And then I heard Sigma was starting to discontinue much of their DSLR macro lenses. And, you know, I give a call to Gary over at Hunt's and I said, Gary, what do you guys sell? What do you have in stock and what do you sell for the DSLR people that are out there? Because there's still a lot of people that are still hanging on to those DSLRs and not really interested in going to mirrorless. And so he says, all we have is a Canon 100 and a Nikon 105. Out of all those lenses you just saw there, that's all they sell. Now, if you wanted to buy any of these lenses, you may get lucky and find one on a shelf somewhere in a camera store that's still new. But once they're all sold off of those shelves, they're not going to be able to get any of these lenses anymore because the lens companies and the manufacturers of cameras and that, Nikons, Canons, they are putting all their time, energy, and money into building lenses for mirrorless systems. They're not interested in DSLRs anymore. They're going into mirrorless. So when I asked Gary, I says, well, what do you have for mirrorless systems right now for macro lenses? He sent me this, and this is a year and a half ago. So I know they've added on a bunch since then. And Tamron has actually just come out with their 90 millimeter for a mirrorless system. So that's where everything is going. Now, it's not to say that you can't get any of these lenses, but you're going to have to go to the used market. You guys down there in Georgia got KEH, and they have lots of macro lenses, and you'll find them in these different focal lengths. So you still can get these lenses, but you're just going to have to go to the used market. Other than that Canon and that Nikon 105 and 100 that I mentioned from Gary, that's the only one that he carries. But Yeah, it just seems like they're kind of forcing you or they want you to move into the mirrorless system. Obviously, it benefits the camera company by selling everybody brand new cameras and new lenses. Now, in the upper right corner, that is a 60 millimeter short focal length macro lens. And I'm going to photograph this Rose of Sharon flower. Now, it's a pretty big flower. It's not a small flower. And I want to fill the frame with that flower. And in order to do that, you can see I have to get about 12 inches from that flower. So the image that I photographed with the 60 millimeters in the upper left corner. So you can see I've just kind of filled it up as much as I can. All right, now below the 60 millimeter, you see a little longer lens, and that is a 90 millimeter Tamron macro lens. And in order to get the same framing like I did with the 60 millimeter, I had to back away with that longer focal length lens. So this is what we call working distance. So I have gained some working distance between me and that subject by going to the longer focal length macro lens. On the bottom, you can see that's a 180 macro lens. Look how big that lens is. That's a 180 macro lens. And you can see I have a great amount of working distance to try to get that same amount of framing like I did with that 60 millimeter. I have to back quite a distance away from that flower. Now, why is that important? Well, let's say that flower now is a live subject. Let's say it was a dragonfly or a butterfly, probably wouldn't be too happy if I'm using a 60 millimeter and I'm 12 inches from its face. More likely it's going to fly off. So if you're a bug photographer shooting live subjects a lot, most of them end up going to that long telephoto macro lenses because they get so much working distance between that camera and that subject. Now, I would say 80%, 80% of the people that came into my workshop over all these years were using lenses that were in the mid-range. So in other words, the 90, the 100, the 105. And that was because of the price range. See, when you get into telephoto macro lenses, you know, you're well over $1,000. And a lot of people would say, well, I don't do quite enough macro to spend that much money on a lens. So I'll go with the mid-range because in the mid-range, you know, for many years, you could get them for $500, $600, $700. And that's why most of those people ended up in the mid-range because of the price. They could afford that better. And those lenses do just fine. I mean, you can still shoot bugs with them and things like that. Most people tend to shoot a lot of stationary subjects, flowers, you know, other subjects that are not moving and not going to run away. So mid-ranges work pretty well. Now, about 7, 8 years ago, Tamron came out with the first lens. It was an 18 to 270 and it claimed it had macro capabilities. Now, it's not a true macro lens in the sense that it doesn't get in quite as close as a true macro lens, but it does get into a pretty darn small area. So I got excited because what I like about these zoom lenses, and this is the 18 to 400 that I use on my DSLR. I also have the 18 to 300 from Tamron. That's on my mirrorless camera. Now, what I like about this wide range is that if I want to show an environmental shot, so I'm out in this swampy area photographing leaves that are floating on the water, and I want to show you that environment that I'm in, I can always throw one of those lenses on a camera body, put it on a tripod, set myself timer, 10 seconds, walk out there and get in the picture and show you a 18 millimeter wide angle shot. And then if I'm in a botanical garden and I've got subjects that are 5, 6 feet away from the walkway that I have to stay on and I can't walk in there, get close to that subject, that 300 and 400 millimeter zoom can zoom out to frame my subject. So when I do my workshops in botanical gardens, I tell people bring your zoom lens because all the zoom lenses nowadays have that ability to reach out, and yet they also have the ability to focus in real close. Now, when I'm in these little streams near my house in December, when the ice starts to freeze at the edge, it creates these little abstract patterns, and I can stay on the bank and just zoom out to get my subject. So that is a really nice benefit. Other than if I was using my Tamron 90, see, I'd have to be in super close or be on the ice. I wouldn't be able to get those shots. This was shot with the 18 to 400 at the Chicago Botanical Garden. It was a cactus that was blooming at the time when I was there, and I shot that. And that thing was probably about 5 feet off of the walkway, but I could reach out and capture that shot with that telephoto. It can also shoot in as small as 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Get a ruler out and look at it, 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches. That's a pretty small area. Both of those lenses will do that. And most zoom lenses of today from companies will get in real close to your subject like that. It's just the way they're designed. You remember back in the old days when you had a zoom lens, you might have a 4 or 5 foot minimum focusing distance lens, and then to get it in closer, you'd have to put extension tubes on between the lens and the camera body. But nowadays, these lenses will do wide angle, telephoto, and get in close-up photography. So it's a great, great systems that we have with these new lenses. The tripod I'm using is the VEO 3 Plus 263AT. It's from a company called Vanguard. And this is the tripod right here. Now, it has a center post that rises straight up, and then it goes into a horizontal position. So I'm able to get my camera out directly over top of subjects when I'm going to shoot. And it also has the ability to have that center post lower and raise. So if I need to move the camera closer to the subject or back it up away from it, I can lower and raise that center post. Manfrotto's had a tripod for many years that would do this same feature, would go into that horizontal position. But the problem with the Manfrotto is that if you wanted to move the camera now closer to the subject or raise it up away from it, you'd have to raise it and lower it with all 3 of the legs. The legs would have to go up and down. But with the Vanguard, the actual center post lowers and raises, so that's nice. You can also shoot in really close to subjects where you can move the tripod out of your way over to the side. And then the legs on this tripod will go straight out so that you can literally put the base of the tripod directly right onto the ground. And with the center post extended out like you see, I can put that camera as low as I need to go to capture subjects right on the ground. Another nice feature of the VEO series is one of the legs on the tripod will actually unscrew from the tripod, and you can put your head on top, and now you got a monopod. So let's say you go to a botanical garden and they say, sorry, you can't bring your tripod in. Unscrew one of the legs, put the head on, and they're usually pretty cool about monopods. They just don't want the tripods with the legs sticking out where someone's going to trip over them. The ball heads, most of you probably use, this is a standard type ball head with a big heavy metal housing. It's got the ball at the top, and then you have the little U slot right here. Now, landscape and wildlife photographers don't use the U slot much because they're always shooting straight ahead at their subjects, but we tend to shoot a lot towards the ground. And so we end up moving into that U slot so the camera is aimed at the ground. And then you might have to pivot the ball head, kind of side to side to get your framing on your subject that you want. So not impossible, but a little bit inconvenient having to work in that U slot and pivot the ball head. The head that I'm using is made by a company called Acratech, Acratech. And the version that I'm using is called the Ultimate Ball Head. And this is the ultimate ball head. Now you can see they've cut away all that big metal housing that makes it, so heavy. So this is very lightweight, also made out of all aluminum, also making it very super lightweight. Now the key to this head for the macro photographer is that they've cut away all this facing, which would be on a standard ball head. You'd have part of that would be closed in and have a U slot. Now without a U slot and all that open area right there, I can maneuver my camera into any area, any position for framing, and I have no restrictions. I could just move it anywhere I want to go, and there's no U slot and no pivoting the head back and forth. It's the best head for getting your camera into positions, because in macro photography, we are constantly maneuvering our camera into all kinds of different areas for framing. Whereas, like I say, a landscape wildlife photographer just shooting straight ahead all the time, so that's not that important to them. So this is an excellent head for the macro photographer. Can be used for any type of photographer. There was one professional landscape photographer that I know that was using this head for his business. So it can be used for all kinds of photography, but for macro, it really stands out. Now this head and that tripod, let me just mention, the tripod is not expensive. It runs about $229 for just the tripod, no head, and which is not very expensive for a tripod. Now the ball head is a little pricey, runs in the $369 price range, but there are heads like Really Right Stuff and Kirk's and Uniball and that are more expensive than that. But and obviously a lot of ball heads are less expensive, so $369 is a little bit pricey. But if you can afford it, that's an excellent head. Now, as far as accessories,
Hey,
we do
Mike, real
carry.
quick.
Yeah.
We had on the chat, someone wanted the name of the number of that tripod again. I'm monitoring the chat so that I can answer questions.
Of the tripod?
The tripod, yes, sir.
Okay, so there it is, VEO 3 Plus 263AT. And you are recording it, so if anybody
Yeah.
misses anything, they can always check it in the recording.
Yeah.
All right. So
Thank you, sir.
diffuser, yes. Diffuser is one of the most important accessories that we carry. It is as important as your camera, your lens, your tripod head, all that stuff. It is just as important as those things. All right, now this is a Dame's rocket flower, and you can see the top portions of the petals, kind of a lighter color. It looks almost pink, whitish pink, all right? But they're not supposed to be whitish pink. They're supposed to be purple. It's a purple flower. And you may think, well, maybe shot it on a sunny day at noon and it's washing out the colors, which can happen on sunny days. But no, this was shot on a cloudy day. So even on a cloudy day, you can get enough intensity of light and reflection off those white clouds that'll wash out colors on subject areas that are running parallel to the sky. So what you need to do, get yourself a 12-inch diffuser. They do make them in larger 20 and 22-inch, but I've always used the 12 because I'm shooting smaller areas and I don't really need anything bigger than that 12 inches. But once you put that diffuser directly over the top of that Dame's rocket, it brings the color back to the natural color. There it is. Image on the left, no diffuser. Image on the right with the diffuser. It's amazing. It's like a magic trick when you see it going from washed out color to full color. And remember, this is a cloudy day. Most people assume, hey, you already have a diffuser up there with those clouds. But no, even on a cloudy day, you can run into issues with washed out colors. All right. Now, on that same cloudy day, I'm walking down a pathway and I look to my left. I remember this and I see this leaf. Now, if you look at the top of the leaf, the colors are washed out, right? That's the area that's running parallel to the sky, parallel to those clouds. Now, the front of the leaf you can see is dipped down towards the ground and it's 90 degrees to the sky and it retains its color. See, it's the areas that are running parallel. All right, so we put the diffuser over top of that and we can bring some of that color back on the top. Now the color on the top is not quite as dark and intense as it is on the front of the leaf, but at least in post-processing, I can go in there and darken that top section down to match up with the front of the leaf. But if all I had to work with is that image on the left with that washed out color, I'd have a much tougher time trying to bring some color in there and darken it down to match up with the front. So very important. And remember, these are in cloudy days. Now, what happens on a sunny day? On a sunny day, I'm going to diffuse my subject 100% of the time. Hear that? 100% of the time. I never let the sunlight directly hit my subject unless I'm using for special effect like backlighting. But other than backlighting, I am never ever letting that sunlight hit my subject because there's three bad things that happen when sunlight hits your subject. Early morning, late evening is a warmer sunlight than midday. And what it can do is it can alter the color of the subject you're photographing. The sun will actually alter the color. Also can cause shadows in areas that you might not want shadows. And it can also wash out colors in different times of the day, so you can lose your colors too. Now the image on the left, that's a sumac branch, and that's early morning sunlight right at daybreak hitting that sumac branch. And it has altered the color of those leaves to a yellowish green, almost lighter green. Also, a couple of minor shadows on the right side of the frame over here, just minor, no, not a big deal. Sometimes you get a lot of shadows, but again, just a couple little minor shadows on that one. Now, once I put the diffuser between that subject and the sunlight and shade it, now you see the image on the right side. That is the natural green of those leaves. Also, if you notice on the right side in those two leaves, there's no more shadow there. So we've brought the color back to the natural color it's supposed to be. We've eliminated any shadows that may be there. And if there's any loss of color, it brings that back too. So again, very important tool, because if you didn't have that out there, you're going to end up with the image on the left with the wrong color. So yeah, and it's an inexpensive thing. It's like less than 15 bucks. Now, some of you may end up using it, and I use it occasionally when I'm indoor shooting. Let's say you have a subject, has a little sheen to the subject, and the light's coming in at right angles, could cause a little, hot spots on there, little white spots. So I will use my diffuser, and it will eliminate that. Now, some people have asked, like, hey, couldn't you use a polarizing filter? Polarizing filters work on some occasions, but they don't work 100% of the time. I started trying polarizers 20 years ago, and I found that they did work some of the time, but not all of the time, because they have to be at the right angle of the light before they work properly. So what I also notice is that whenever I use diffusers, it works 100% of the time, and it's far, far less than a polarizer. So get yourself a diffuser. Now you're thinking, do I have to hold this diffuser all the time? You could just hand hold it over your subject if you want, but if you wanted an assistant out there with you, you could buy the plamp. Now the plamp is made by a company called Wimberly. And you can see on the left side, there's a large clamp, flexible tubing. On the other end, there's a smaller clamp. Now, if you're in real close to your subjects and you're photographing, I've got a little butterfly weed, this orange butterfly weed I'm going to shoot right here, and I'm in real close to it. So I could attach it onto the leg of the tripod like you see here, and then on the other end, attach my diffuser into the clamp, and then that will hold my diffuser for me so I can just get behind the camera, work my camera, and not worry about holding that diffuser. But let's say that I'm using a telephoto macro lens and I'm 3 feet from that flower. Um, I will not be able to attach it to the tripod leg because there is not a long enough flexible tubing there that will reach out and put that diffuser over top of my subject. So what Wimberly did is they came up with a stake system. So it's a plastic hollow tube, and in one end is inserted a screwdriver. And when you want to turn it into a stake, you pull the screwdriver out, you reverse it, put the handle of the screwdriver into the tube, and then the shaft of the screwdriver becomes the stake. Then you can go ahead, stake it in next to your flower, and you can take your clamp it onto the stake, and hold your diffuser over your flower. And now you are independent of that, and you can move your camera back as far as you want, move it all around, and you don't have to worry about being attached to your tripod. So it's a really good system. The clamp runs about $45. The stake is about $25. Now they also show on the Wimberly website that you can stake next to your flower, and then you can attach the clamp onto the stem of the flower in case there's a little breeze that day and your flower's moving around. You can steady that flower by attaching it, the clamp to it. They've also they've incorporated foam inside of the clamp so that when you clamp onto the stem, it doesn't cause any damage to the stem. So they've thought all that stuff out. Camera settings. Well, now we're going to start getting some weird stuff. Okay, ISO 2000 on both of my cameras. Both cameras I'm set at 2000 ISO, and I'll explain a little more about that later. Manual or aperture priority. For many years, I used to just shoot manual, where I would set the f-stop for my depth of field, and I would set the shutter speed for my exposure. And the last few years, I really have kind of just gone over to aperture priority mode so that I just have to set my f-stop for my depth of field, and the cameras are good enough nowadays. They do a pretty nice job at setting the shutter speed for the exposure. Now, it's been 24 years when I got into photography, 3 years before I turned it into a business. And I realized with doing close-up photography that we could shoot things in our home, which is a real nice benefit over landscape and wildlife photographers because they can't shoot in their home, obviously. So we can still continue to shoot in the winter months, or if it's really hot in the summer months, we can be indoors photographing things. Now, I would go to the local grocery store, which had a little flower department, and I would pick out some flowers and bring them home and shoot them in the house. Now, what I found was the brightest place in my home with the most natural light was on this stairway, because that is a 2-story high foyer, and at the front of the house, there's a very large window on the second story that floods that stairway with beautiful natural light. It just comes in there and kind of wraps itself around the subject. It's not like a directional light. So that is the best place to photograph in my home. Now, one of the problems with shooting your home, and in my case, I don't want stairs as the background behind my flowers, obviously. So I have to put something back there. Now, when I first started shooting in the home years and years and years ago, I was using black materials like fleece and felt, and I was using white boards and things like that for the background. So all my flower photography indoors was coming out black and white backgrounds, and it looked okay to begin with, but got a little bored with it, a little too artsy, that look with black and white backgrounds. So I wanted to have backgrounds that had a natural look, like I photographed those flowers out in nature, okay, out in a field somewhere. I wanted a natural background. So what I did, I went out to some of the parks near my house, I have my tripod, I have my camera set up, and now if you're going to do this, you want to use your macro lens. If you have a macro lens, try it first with that. If not, try it with your zoom. You want to make sure your f-stop is set at the smallest f-stop number, 2.8 or 3.5 or whatever your smallest f-stop. Make sure it's set at the smallest f-stop. Now I have manually focused because you don't want to autofocus this. You want to be in manual focus. I have manually focused on this grass right there. Now you can see it's all in focus, pretty much all in focus. And what you want to do is while you're manually focusing and you've got the subject in focus, take your focusing ring and just move it slightly left or slightly right of the focus point and watch it start to go out of focus. So what you want to do is you want to take the focusing ring and start rotating it to the right side, you know, a good distance to the right side, and then rotate it past the focus point on the left side. Now on my lens, it seems to work best when I go to the left side, and I can rotate that lens and keep rotating it to the left to the point where that subject, that grass you just saw, will go completely out of focus and turn to a solid color. And when you get it there, you photograph it and you end up with that right there. So that grass that you saw right there with my lens taken completely out of focus will produce that color right there. That is a natural green in nature that I can use as backgrounds when I'm shooting indoors. Now, you could just do this on the grass in your yard, just anything green it'll work with. Now, let's say you're looking at this and you're going, well, that's a little bit too solid for me. I like a little bit of texture, a little bit of details in there. So this is a different subject. So instead of taking it to a solid color, taking the focusing ring out of focus to where it goes to a solid color, I just take it to the point where it leaves a little bit of detail in there, and you end up with something like that. So you can take it to whatever level you want, photograph it, and that's what you'll have. You also want to have a variety of different colors. All right, so there's some yellow flowers with brown grasses, and you're going to get a little more of a different shade of green. Here's some pinks with the greens, and you'll get some pinks in the greens. And this is some flowers I shot at a botanical garden somewhere where I just took them out of focus and just left the shades of colors in there. And you'll want to have, like I say, a lot of different colors, because if you're photographing your flowers indoors, you may want to use one of the colors that's a kind of a complementary color to your flower color. But this way you're going to have, you know, more of a natural looking background behind your subject. Now, let's say you're lazy. Let's say you're like, I'm not going out and doing that. That looks like a lot of work. You got another option, okay? Uh, you can go to the hobby stores like Michael's Crafts, Hobby Lobby, and they will have a large area within their store that's for scrapbook people. And scrapbook people need backgrounds for their scrapbooking. So they sell a whole row full of all these different books of backgrounds. So I bought just a couple here to show you. I got one on the left. You can see that's all solid color backgrounds. There's 58 pages, comes in a 12-inch by 12-inch size. On the right side, that's kind of abstract patterns that are put onto those backgrounds. And here's a couple pages from that. And this is kind of similar to what I'm doing with my lens when I'm taking it out of focus. All right, kind of that blotchy looking effect. Okay, so this is similar looking to what we can do by using our lenses. So if you want to just go and buy some books like this here and use those as backgrounds, those will work too. Now, if you're going to print your own, let's say you're going to go out and photograph your own and you want to print them, you're going to want to print them on a matte paper, okay? You don't want to print them on glossy papers, semi-gloss, lusters, anything like that. You want a dead matte paper, because a glossy paper behind your subject at a certain angle may, catch some light and cause some glare on there. So make sure you're using a matte paper if you're going to print them, or hopefully if you go to a printer, they have matte paper. You're also going to want to pick up some matte board, foam core, or cardboard. Any of those three materials will stiffen up the background. So you're going to want to take your print and attach it to a backboard to stiffen it up. Matte board, obviously, is what we use for framing when we frame our pictures. The foam core is what they use on the back of photos when you frame them. And then cardboard is just cardboard. So pick up something like that because you want to attach it. Now, you'll want to also go to Home Depot or Lowe's, go into the carpet section in those stores and look for carpet tape. Carpet tape has adhesive on both sides of the tape, right? So what you do is cut your backboard, same size as your print, lay it on a table. I cut 4 strips of carpet tape, as you can see, adhere it to the backboard, and then you'll pull off this section here of the tape on this side so it exposes the adhesive, and now you can just take your print, lay it right on top of there, and it'll stick forever. It'll never come off. That stuff is so sticky. All right, so that's one way. The other way, if you wanted to buy some 3M spray adhesive, you could buy the spray adhesive, spray it on the backboard, spray it on the print, lay it on there. I had not had the best experience because they tend to kind of bubble or pop off eventually. But with this carpet tape, it never comes off. All right, now it was mentioned before my program about shooting in the daytime with wind, flowers and wind, and it's a problem, big problem. All right, so how do I avoid the wind? All right, well, I get out of bed early and I look at the forecast for the next week ahead of time. And I typically look for the days that are going to be cloudy. I'd much rather be out shooting on a cloudy day than a sunny day. So I'll look at next week's forecast and I'll say, okay, next Wednesday, it's going to be a cloudy day. I'm going to make sure at 5 o'clock when I get out of bed in the morning, I'm going to look outside the door wall at the back of my house, look at the flowers on the patio, look at the leaves on the trees. And on Wednesday morning, if I see that everything is dead still, then that's going to be a good morning to go out. There's no wind out there. And what I'll do is it takes me 20 minutes to get to the park. So I will leave 20 minutes before when it's going to be the first light on those fields or woods. And so I will drive in the dark and get there by daylight. And I will have about an hour and a half to 2 hours of no wind or at least very low wind to work with my flowers. And could be other subjects too that I'm shooting. Could be bugs, could be other things, but it's going to be about an hour and a half, 2 hours of no wind on that morning. And then after it starts to warm up, the temperature starts to warm up, what happens? The wind starts to move. It starts to move the wind. And then at about 2 hours, wind's blowing and I'm heading back home. I just am not going to deal with that wind out there. So let's say on that Wednesday morning, I get up and I look out my door wall and I see the flowers are moving back and forth and the leaves and the trees are moving. I go, you know what? There's wind out there. I'm not going out that day. I'll wait till the next day or whatever. But I'm only going to go out and shoot on days in the very early morning, right at daybreak, on windless mornings. And I'm going to get, again, about an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe of no wind. And then as the air heats up, you're going to start picking up some wind and I'm going to head back home. So that's how all my images are photographed in the early morning at daybreak. Clutter is another problem. Got lots of clutter out there. Every time we're out there shooting, we're going to have all this ugly clutter behind our subjects. So some nice purple cone flowers. This little pair right here is a nice little composition. But look what's behind it, all this massive clutter back there. And that's what macro photographers struggle with, is shooting subjects where there's so much clutter behind it. It's a big problem. Same with these are prairie cone flowers. And as you can see, they're stuck in all that clutter behind it. So a little bit difficult when you have to deal with all this clutter like that. And if you go to botanical gardens, same problem. They pack everything so tight together that anything you want to photograph, any subject you photograph, you're going to have 3 and 4 different subjects right behind it, and it's going to clutter everything up. We want nice, clean backgrounds behind our subject. I have a family farm not far from my house, and they grow flowers for people to come in and pick the flowers, and they charge them for the flowers, and they allow photographers to come in and photograph the flowers. They're very nice that they let us do that. But as you can see behind me, the rows and rows and rows of flowers are all tightly packed together, and they're difficult to shoot because, again, so much clutter. Now, one thing that I realized one day, and this is about 10 years ago, I think it was, I'm going, I have that same problem when I'm shooting in a house. I got stairs behind my subject, and what am I doing? I'm using a background back there to get rid of the problem with the stairs. I'm thinking, why am I dealing with this clutter out in the field? I can bring my backgrounds with me out into the fields and the woods, and I can photograph them with my backgrounds, and I eliminate the issues with the clutter. So I no longer have to deal with clutter problems because I'm using my natural backgrounds that I've shot behind my subject. So I can go ahead, shoot these. And there's another odd thing that you're going to hear, I shoot at f/32, okay? And that's for maximum depth of field. So there's those flowers, everything in focus from front to back and with a background that's eliminated the clutter. This is the easiest way to photograph any subject out in nature, is to use a background behind it. So these are fiddleheads, which in another month or so, I'm going to be able to get out in the woods, start shooting. Fiddleheads are going to pop up. And as you can see, they're growing in a lot of clutter. You got an old tree trunk behind it and a bunch of tree branches. But I can use my background behind there to clean up that background and photograph it and get it all in focus by using that f/32. And doesn't matter if it reaches past that, because all I'm getting is that solid color background behind it. This little plant here, little fan plant here at the edge of a swamp. There was actually a little snail climbing up on one of those leaves, and there were gaps in there, so I needed to clean up the gaps, and there it is. So you got the little snail, he's climbing up there, and I just needed to clean up these two areas right here. So the background took care of that. In my backyard, I have some ferns growing, same thing. I placed the background behind the ferns. And lily of the valley, those are going to start popping here in another month or so in the woods. And they're very difficult to shoot because they're so low to the ground. But on this day, I found a little group of flowers with some really nice combination of leaves. But the top part, you could see into the background, which was clutter. So I put my background behind it, and look what's holding my background. That's the plant. Just like the plant you use to hold your diffuser, now the plant is used to hold my background. So it has dual purposes, all right? All right, there's the lily of the valley with that little top area just cleaned up with my background. A lot of times I just hand hold the backgrounds behind the subject I'm shooting, and I don't even get fussy on making sure the background covers the whole framing that I've framed up with my camera. I just need to make sure that the background covers the area that I've determined that I'm going to crop out in post-processing. So on this one here, you can see I've got the bottom of the background just below this flower here, and enough on all around it there, and that when I get into my post-processing, I'll crop that out in post-processing. Same with this flower here. I just got it down low enough because I know I'm going to crop down here somewhere, and then I'll clone out this leaf here, and there's the image. Now, if you notice, the flower, the buds, the stem, all tack sharp in focus, and that is the f/32. Print sizes. My backpack will actually hold a 8.5 by 11 print, and that's pretty much most of my shots are done with 8.5 by 11 print. Your modern day backpacks have an opening in there that you can put a laptop, slide a laptop into, or a notebook. I found that it's a perfect place to drop in my backgrounds. So I'll carry about 5 or 6 different color backgrounds and slide them into that backpack. Now, if you have a larger backpack, you might be able to make larger backgrounds. Fill the frame. This is another way that I love to shoot fill the frame. If you're out there and you don't have backgrounds with you, you can use this method here and fill the frame. Now, this is a agave that I photographed at the San Diego Botanical Garden, and what I saw was this S-curve right here. You know how people always talk about S-curves? And I go, wow, there's an S-curve right there. So I'm going to position my camera so that I can get that S-curve and that leaf in the frame in the foreground, and then I have all these really nice leaves in the background to create a background so I don't have to worry about the clutter, and there they are filling in the background for me. Same with this, I think this is a century plant, but if I was to photograph the upper parts of it, you'd get all this ugly background behind it. But I'm going to go down in here. There's a really nice abstract little pattern at the base of that plant, and I'm going to zoom in on that and capture that nice abstract. And now I'm filling the frame with the subject. I have totally eliminated any background behind it. Same with the flowers. If you're out there photographing flowers, there's a lot of the larger size flowers that you can get in and zoom in and capture those flowers, and you're filling the frame and showing off all that beautiful design and detail in the flower. And here's another one. Again, just got in real close. This is a botanical garden in Chicago. Just got over top of it. It was in a pot and straight down, shooting straight down on it. And this is hibiscus from Longwood Gardens in Pennsylvania. Now, I post this image, maybe once a year on some of the flower groups that I'm on Facebook. And there's always comments. There's always multiple comments asking, did you focus stack that? And I always tell them, I go, no, I don't focus stack. I shot it with one shot at f/32 maximum depth of field. And they're always shocked. All right, here's a nice rose that I bought at the grocery store, flower department, brought it home, set it up right in my house, photographed it. And dahlias are another great flower because they're very large and you can get in there and fill the frame with dahlias. All right, and let's say that you can't get in and fill the frame with your lens. Well, you don't have to. Nowadays with our larger megapixel cameras, both my megapixel cam in my cameras are like 26 megs. And I don't have to shoot in real tight anymore. I can just shoot a larger area and crop out what I want in post-processing. Same with this guy right here. I don't really worry about framing real tight anymore. I just shoot larger areas. It's much simpler than trying to get in there and frame it real tight and crop out what I want in post-processing. Look at the details in there, all nice and sharp. That's f/32. All right,
Mike, we had someone ask if you ever turn on image stabilization and just shoot handheld and not on a tripod.
Never. I'm always on a tripod 100% of the time. I'm too shaky even with the stabilizer. All right, plus shooting f/32, you're going to have a little longer shutter speeds. All right, so now this rose here, all I wanted was this area right in here. Just that small area right there. But again, I just framed a large area, cropped out what I want in post-processing. I call this a spiral staircase plant. Shot at the Chicago Botanical Garden. It looks like a spiral staircase and just some water dropped, raindrop on the leaves. Another little full frame shot. And so you can do a lot of full frame shots, fill in the frame with your subject so you don't have to worry about any background behind it. Now you're all scratching your head's about ready to blow up because you're like, Mike, we've been told for years and years, never ever shoot over f/16 because of diffraction. So most photographers will always try to stay in that f/8 range because that is where you get the least amount of diffraction, and you get the sharpest quality out of your lens shooting at the f/8. And some people say even up to f/11. So, but never go over f/16 because then you're going to start getting some softness from the diffraction. Now, inside your lens, you have an aperture that opens and closes. If you're going to shoot at the smallest f-stop, and it could be a 2.8, could be a 3.5, or whatever your smallest f-stop is, your aperture in your lens is going to be what it's called wide open. All right, wide open. And that's going to give you the shallowest depth of field out of that lens. So you can see the image at top. The little man we focused on right there is in focus, but then the background is out of focus. That's the shallow depth of field at 2.8. Now, as you go to f4 and 5, 6, and f8 and f11, f16, 22, and up to 32, you can see the aperture is at now the smallest opening in that lens. But if you look above there, you'll see the man's in focus and the mountains in the background are also in focus. So that is going to give us the maximum depth of field out of that lens. And that's what I want. I want everything in focus on my subject. I want maximum depth of field. Now, when we're shooting at the f/32, all right, the light from the subject we're photographing is entering into that lens and it is moving inside that lens down, traveling down through that lens, and it gets to the back of the lens and now it encounters the aperture, the tiny little aperture opening. Now the light rays and these waves have to bend. They have to bend themselves to get into that little opening to get that image to your sensor. And when those waves are bending, they are creating some softness in the details of your subject. So when it comes out of your camera, it's not real sharp looking. All right. It's going to be a little bit soft. The great thing about digital photography, though, is we have sharpening programs. Every software company offers you a sharpening program. In Photoshop, a lot of people used to use Unsharp Mask. Nik Software has Sharpener Pro. Topaz has the new Sharpen AI, supposed to be phenomenal. I've never used it, but people say it's great. And the program I use, which is called Smart Photo Editor, has sharpening filters built into the program. All right, so why do you think they design these sharpening programs? Yeah, for images that might be slightly soft, that you can sharpen them and make them look sharp. So here's a sunflower that I photographed at that family farm near my house. And you can see all that beautiful details of this sunflower in here, but you can also see that it's not real sharp looking. It's a little soft looking, and that is the diffraction at the f32. Also the petals, there's a little green lines in here in the petals and lines in the petals out here, but you really don't see them that well because again, the softness from the diffraction. Now I will take this image into my Smart Photo Editor program. I will crop it. I will add some, color enhancements, and I will sharpen it with the sharpening filters, and I end up with that right there. So now you can see all that fine detail that's right in this center part is all nice and sharp now. Look at the lines, the little tiny green lines that are in these petals right here, where you could hardly see them in the original, but now that filter goes in there, it identifies all those lines and information, and it sharpens it all up. So again, look at that, how soft it looks. Now it's all nice and sharp. Here's another one. Lots of details in the center part here. Lots of details of lines here. Again, they're all soft. All the little tiny hairs at the edge of these leaves here, again, you can see they're not very sharp, but I don't worry about that. Like I say, I wanted maximum depth of field. I want it all in focus. So I'm going to crop this, color enhance it, sharpen it, and there it is. Man, look at all the details in there now. Now, some people have a difference of opinion on how much to sharpen. This is sharpened to the point where it now actually starts to look like almost a sketching or something, not real. So you can take it to that level, but you don't have to. You can leave it, with less sharpening so that you don't have that much detail to make it look kind of fake almost. So I like a lot of sharpness, and that's me. But some people say, well, our eyes don't see things that sharp, so I'm not going to sharpen it to that level. Left side, you can see that's out of the camera. That is a dahlia, a very, very unusual dahlia, lots of curls in that. But again, in the yellow area right here, you can see it's not real sharp. You see all the petals, all these nice little curls and that are not all very sharp. But if you look on the right side, after I've sharpened it, brings all the details out throughout that image. So we do have a correction tool for that. Now, you do a lot of post-processing to your images. You control the exposure of your images if it's not right. You control the contrast in your images. You control the colors in your images. You do all kinds of post-processing in your images. Why not use the sharpening tools? That's what they're there for. So my main goal is to get everything in focus. That's why I'm shooting at the highest f-stop. So why I shoot at high f-stop numbers is because when we're shooting in really close to our subjects in macro close-up photography, we lose a ton of depth of field. So much depth of field we lose. We're not like landscape and wildlife photographers shooting at f8, f11s, getting all kinds of depth of field. When we're in really close to our subjects, we are losing so much depth of field. That's why I'm shooting in those high numbers. Now, this is a ruler I set up on a table. You can see that my lens is in really close to that ruler, and the front of my lens is not parallel to the ruler because sometimes we can't always get parallel. Sometimes we have to shoot on bad angles, and when we shoot on bad angles, that increases the amount of depth of field in that subject. So when I shot this at the 2.8, smallest f-stop of my lens, you can see all I'm getting in focus is one tiny 1/8 of an inch in focus. That's like nothing. Get a ruler out, look at an 1/8 of an inch, is nothing. Look over on the right side, f32, get the ruler all in focus. Now, instead of the ruler, I pulled the ruler out, put this peacock feather in there. Now, people tell you that you should shoot in f8 as much as you can because you're going to get the least amount of diffraction. You're going to get the sharpest quality. But the problem is, look what I get in focus at f8. That's not going to get what I want in focus at f8. I can't shoot there. Now, if you notice the f8, the area that is in focus is all very nice and sharp. But again, I'm not getting what I want in focus. So I'm going to go to a higher f-stop, and I'm going to go up to f22. So you're thinking, wow, f22, that's pretty big. Even at f22, I can't get it all in focus. Even at f22, I'm still lacking focus down on the bottom and lacking focus up here. That's what I said. When we get in really close to our subject, we lose a lot of depth of field, even at an f22. That's why I'm shooting at the f32, because I'm going to get it all in focus. All right, so I go to that largest f-stop to get everything in focus in one shot. So Maybe your lens will only go to f/22. Well, I'm afraid to say that you will not get as much depth of field as I get with my 32 lens. And luckily, all my lenses over all the years I've been shooting Tamarons all went to f/32. But I did buy a lens that's a Fuji for my mirrorless Fuji camera about 6 months ago, and it only went to f/22. And I would assume I would get pretty much the same as my f/32 lens, but I was wrong. I did not get the same amount of depth of field as I did it with my lenses at f/32. So you know what I did? I sold that lens. I go, that's not going to do what I want it to do. So I ended up selling it. All right, you don't need to focus stack, at least not for close-up photography, which is what I'm teaching you tonight. This is close-up photography. Now, if you can get it done with one shot and sharpen it, why would you go through the hassle of focus stacking? Not to mention you talked about wind earlier. Well, good luck trying to shoot outside with the wind and focus stack. All right, now here's where focus stacking actually is needed, okay? Now let's say that you're one of those bug photographers and you're shooting high magnification. You've gone beyond a macro lens that's 1:1 and you're in 2:1, 3:1, 4:1, 5:1 macro land, okay? You are going to have depth of field in those high magnifications that's literally fractions. There's like no depth of field when you get into high magnification. So you can't shoot at a high f-stop and get it all in focus. It just doesn't work in high magnification. So focus stacking, that is where you would use focus stacking, is when you get into that high magnification. And you'll see bug photographers, they'll post an image and say, I shot 60 images of that bug to get it all in focus. So that it is needed for certain types, which is high magnification, but for close-up like I'm doing, I can get all the depth of field I want at the f/32 with one shot, less hassle. All right, now let's go to the opposite end and photograph at the 2.8, at that shallow depth of field, because you're going to get a totally different look on your photography, okay? Totally different. Now, a lot of photographers like to use what they call a lens baby, because lens baby gives this kind of distorted soft focus of your flower photography. It's real popular amongst flower photographers. So I shot some lens baby many years ago and kind of gave up on them because I was kind of feeling I could get the same results with my macro lens at 2.8. This is a shot with the lens baby, and it produces this soft focus, very little in focus, kind of a dream like you're in a hazy dream looking at this flower. And it's a real popular style amongst macro photographers, okay? A lot of the ladies that shoot flowers will go to some of the lens baby gurus like Kathleen Clemens and Jackie Kramer, Jerry Jones, Ann Belmont, Andrea Galect out of the Netherlands, and they will take classes from them to learn how to shoot with this lens baby to get that soft focused look. But what I found is I can use my macro lens and shoot at the 2.8, remember the shallow depth of field, and get this same effect. So here's a shot with my lens, my Tamron 90 at 2.8, and you can see how shallow the depth of field. Remember on that ruler, 1/8 of an inch? Well, that's all you're getting in these shots with a 2.8 when you're in really close. So what I do is, with this style, I shoot into the side of the flower rather than straight on the flower, because you shoot straight on, the flower is pretty flat, so you don't get as much of that softness. If you shoot into the side of it, there's a lot of depth from the front of the flower to the back, so you really can tell the softness. And so I'll focus on a petal, whatever petal from that flower is closest to the front of my lens. That's where I put my focus, is on that front petal. And then it'll soften into the flower and then totally blur out the background in the back. So here's Gerber Daisy on my stairs. And I am going to put my focus right on the tips of these this little petals right here. Right on the tips is where I'm going to place my focus. And then it'll soften into the flower and blur out the stairs in the background. So there it is. And you can see how shallow the depth of field is. All I'm getting in focus at 2.8 is that little bit on those tips right there. And then it'll soften the petals and the flowers. And then the stairs in the background will blur into a solid color. All right, here's a Himalayan blue poppy at Longwood Gardens. They're actually in bloom right now. It's about a 2-week bloom in March. Every year I say I'm going to go down there and shoot them, but I always end up missing it. But anyways, this is one year I did make it down there, and there is the pedal that is closest to the front of my lens, and I put my focus right there, and you can see how it softens the petals in the background and then solid color background back in there. Now, reason why I put my focus in the foreground is because when someone views my images that are out of focus like this, they're looking for something in focus, right? They're searching around trying to find something in focus. If I was to move the focus point now, okay, somewhere into the center of the flower in here, all right, let's move the focus point there. Look what happens in the foreground. Big old massive blur in the foreground. That's not very appealing. All right, so that's why I'm putting it in the foreground and letting it soften into the flower and then blur out the background rather than having it in the foreground. Same here, foreground flower petal right there, focused on that, and then softens into the flower, blurs out the background. There's the tip, right closest to the front of my lens. There's my focus point. Look at the nice softness in the petals and the shades of colors that happen in the flowers directly behind it. All right, now let me tell you about that soft focus. You go and decide you want to do some soft focus flower photography, and you show it to your family and your friends and your coworkers and neighbors and say, hey, look at my photography. I'm photographing these flowers. And the first thing out of their mouth is, why is it out of focus? Doesn't make any sense. You know, and those people that are non-photographers, non-artistic people, they tend to use their cell phones and their point and shoot cameras. And what do those do really well when they take pictures? They get it all in focus. You know, a cell phone is like shooting at f32. All right. Now, also when they view photography, like landscape photography, right, or maybe some journalism or architectural photography, everything is in focus. So their view of photography is that it should all be in focus. And now you're showing them images with like 1% in focus and 99% out of focus, and they just don't understand it. So you will get some pushback when you show those images to your family and friends. Now, I've even had people in camera clubs tell me that they've entered those images into competition, and even the judge, who is a photographer, has told them, I wish there was more in focus. So even photographers sometimes don't understand that style. All right, let's talk about lighting. I have never used any flash systems, never used any ring lights, and I don't have any LEDs that I generally use. So all my images are shot with natural lighting, okay? That goes for outdoors and also goes for indoors. Even when I'm indoors, I'm shooting basically just using the natural light that's available. There's a very, very, very rare occasion when I might pull out an LED and do some special effect lighting, but other than that, I am 99.9% shooting with natural light, outdoors and indoors. I don't have any hassles with dealing with flash systems and ring lights and all that stuff. I find them to be a pain in the neck. All right, so very simple system I'm using here. Again, different than what you usually hear with the shooting f32. All right, now another thing I had mentioned earlier about the ISO at 2000 on my two cameras, right? Which you're all thinking, oh my God, 2000 ISO. Well, when I started out 24 years ago with a film camera, I was using slide film, and it was a 50 ISO, that slide film. Now, I would go out in the field to shoot at f32, and you know what happens when you're shooting at f32? The aperture inside is at the smallest opening. And what happens is it doesn't allow enough light to come in there, so you have to use a longer exposure, right? So I would be getting 15-second, 20-second, 30-second exposures shooting at f32 back in the film days. But it was okay because I was shooting at daybreak when there was no wind, right? There was no wind out there, so I didn't have any issues shooting those long exposures. Now I get into the digital world in 2004, and now I'm shooting at 100 ISO. So I've doubled from 50 to 100. So I've got a little bit faster shutter speeds, but not much. But every year, a new generation of camera would come out, and all of a sudden the ISOs started to rise higher and higher and higher till now they got ISOs that go up to 100,000. All right, which means that you can shoot at much higher ISOs than you would in the past and still get clean images. So with my two cameras, which are both, $1,000 cameras, under $1,000, I can shoot at 2000 ISO and I don't get any noise out of those cameras. But what it does provide me is a faster shutter speed shooting at that high f-stop number. I'm getting shutter speeds in the 1/15th, 1/30th, 1/60th of a second by using that 2000 ISO. So that is why I'm shooting those high ISOs. It really speeds up my camera. So that's a good thing. And test your camera. See, if you have an older camera, you might not be able to go that high, but I can actually go higher than that and still do okay. But I find the 2000 works real well at the 32 f-stop. All right. Now, I had started a photo club about 5 years ago, it's been now. And that photo club has over 2,900, it says 28, but I've just surpassed 2,900 just recently, members from 29 countries. And it has over 280 instructional videos to teach you all kinds of stuff, way beyond what I'm teaching you here today. If you're interested in learning about the photo club, seeing my images, looking at any workshops, Zoom things I got coming up, there's my website at the bottom. It's just my name, MikeMoats.com, and you can go there and go through the site and check everything out. All right. What I will do is unshare my screen and hang around and answer any questions you have.
Awesome. Do we have any questions? Other than the
So-
couple that got posted in the chat that we've already answered.
So as I told you, I'm total opposite of every pro that you'll have come to your program. Most pros that I know, or pretty much all pros, are using pro cameras. Like I said, I'm using cheap cameras. Most people are using full-blown Photoshop, most pros. I'm using a $29 post-processing program, $29, all right? Another weird thing about me, which you're probably going to be freaked out if you don't already know it. Every pro that'll come to any of your programs or any programs you go to of a pro will tell you should always shoot raw files. And all the images that you saw here today, all the images you'll see on my website are all JPEGs. No raw files, they're all JPEGs. So that'll blow the top off your head. Yeah, so I do everything opposite of all the pros, but I have made a very good living for 21 years doing it this way. All right. So I don't teach people that they should, shoot JPEGs. You got to do what works for you. But, a lot of people ask, well, what do you do, Mike? And I say, well, this is what works for me. And that's how I do my photography. All right. Any questions? Or did I do so well covering everything that there's no questions?
You did a great job. I appreciate you coming to speak to the club tonight. But
Oh,
let's
thanks,
open the
Brad.
floor to questions.
Just unmute yourself and ask
Yep.
away.
Yeah, I went to the
Do you
Gainesville
ever use
Gardens over the
off-camera
weekend.
flash?
Now I wish I had waited until after this presentation. before going.
Yeah. What'd you say, Mike?
I said I went to the Botanical Gardens here in Gainesville last
Yeah.
weekend. Now I
Yeah.
wish I had waited until after this presentation. to go. Now I got to
You know
go
what?
back.
The method I use is so simple. It's so effective, so simple, and it makes life much easier for doing what we do. Yeah. And I'm all about simple and easy and cheap. Well, that's the other thing, people always talk about Tamron being a third-party lens, like it's lesser than a Canon or a Nikon lens. And that's what I've used my whole career, Tamron lenses. Anybody else? Any of you in my macro photo club? I bet there's some here.
I am. I've got it.
Yeah, I know you're in there. I knew you were in there.
I'm
Brian,
also in it.
Who's that?
Danielle McCann.
Oh yeah, Daniel. She's
Yep.
in it.
Yep.
Brian was
In
asking
fact, my photos have been chosen a few times for your.
For the banner.
Yes, they have, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
so
we have a
thank you.
Facebook group that's only for our paid members, and we have over 1,600 of our members on that group. And so every day people are posting images, sharing images, asking questions, and then every day I go and change the banner out with different images.
Brian was asking if you use
with
off-camera.
like little animals like frogs and stuff that you
Oh
and
yeah.
take pictures. This
Yeah.
background messes it up quite a bit, right? So in the
Well-
flower you put this background, but what do you do with frogs and things?
Well, frogs you can't really do that, obviously, right? But bugs, I talk about getting out there at daybreak. You get out there at daybreak on a cool morning in the upper 40s, low 50s, and you can shoot the bugs, and they are not going anywhere because their body temperature lowers down to the point where they cannot move, literally cannot move. And I can literally put a background right behind them as they're sitting there and photograph them. You may have heard photographers that will take a bug and put it in a refrigerator, and the refrigerator lowers the body temperature down so they can take the bug out, put it on a flower, and photograph it so it won't move. So that's something that a lot of photographers do with bugs. But you can do that naturally out in nature by just getting out there on cool mornings. And I can walk right up to them, set up my tripod, put a background behind them, photograph them, and they're not going anywhere till they warm up. And you get about an hour, hour and a half, like I said, of cool temperatures. And then as the air warms up, they warm up and they fly off. Yeah. So yeah, you can do it with bugs. Frogs, another story. You can't do anything with that. Someone else have a question? I think there was two at one time talking. No?
No question,
right.
but I just want to thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Like I said, this was way more fun than sitting upstairs watching TV. Anytime you get a group of photographers together and talk photography, it's a lot of fun.
That's timely because you was thinking about buying a new camera and what you said about thousand. I mean, that would help me quite a bit because you know you have a budget, right? What do you spend on lens, camera? So it's a good balance, I guess. What you're saying.
Well, like I said, 60% of people in my workshops were using cameras that were $1,000 or less. And so it was to show those people that you don't need an expensive camera. Now, I will tell you this. If there are other types of photography that require you to buy more expensive cameras because maybe you want to shoot very high frames per second, maybe you want super high ISO with low noise, so you would have to spend more money to get that feature. So there are certain types of photography that require you to buy more expensive cameras, but that doesn't apply to macro photography. I could take a $500 entry level camera and produce images I'll get published in magazines and sell and do great with.
I mean, I have two entry level macro Canon lens, which I no longer use because I have high end Canon lenses, right? But they're not macro. So what you're saying is I can go back to those low end macro lenses in Canon that I had. It came with the camera essentially. They all say macro on them.
Yeah.
I guess
if they're macro lenses, oh, they're going to be excellent. Now you will get a little bit fooled because some of the companies are selling zoom lens that will label macro in the information about that lens. Now, again, it's not a true macro lens. Macro lenses shoot in the 1:1 magnification. Now, these are in 1:3, 1:4 magnification. So they're not.
What do you look? What do you look for? What do you? If
The
I
magnification.
Yeah. Oh, okay. 1:1.
Well, the magnification of a lot of zoom lenses would be a 1:3, 1:4. Okay. And that, but again, my Tamron lenses, which I believe is a 1:4, gets me into 1.5 by 2.5 inches. It's still pretty darn small, right? But a macro lens will get you into less than, 7/8 of an inch by 1 3/8. It'll get you in much closer than that zoom will. But as you saw today, nothing I shot needed a macro lens. I honestly don't even use my macro lens anymore. I'm using my zoom lenses because they get in close enough to shoot 90% of what I do. So I don't have a need for a macro lens. So my macro lens stays home and I just use my zoom lenses now. And most all your zoom lenses that are produced today all have that feature. They have that ability to focus in real close. It's not like the old zoom lenses. So that's a real nice be. If you're one of those that does some, landscape and you can go out and shoot 18 millimeters and then you want to shoot an animal, you got a 400 millimeter and then you want to shoot close up and you got something that'll shoot as close as 1.5 by 2.5 inches in one lens. They're just fabulous what they do with these things now.
Eye-opening. Thank you.
You are welcome. All right. Anyone else? In about an hour and a half, I got my Michigan Wolverines are playing in the March Madness at 10 o'clock tonight.
Well, we got you done early enough to make it to the game.
Yep. But they are in that that 5th seed, and they're playing the 12th seed, and that is notorious. The 5th seed and against the 12th are notorious of losing. Matter of fact, it happened today. A 5th seed team lost to a 12th seed team today. Earlier, I go, man, we are in a bad place. But we
Well,
got
good luck.
Michigan State though,
Good luck.
and they're predicted possible. There's a couple analysts say they'll be in the Final Four, so we'll see. But we're more Michigan fans than Michigan State fans, but we'll take them if Michigan doesn't make it.
All right, well,
Who's in Georgia that's playing
UGA's playing. I think that's
in
probably
March
it.
Madness?
Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Hmm.
So, all right. Well, thanks
Okay.
again. Appreciate you joining us and being here for our group, and to the rest of the group. I hope that you will all consider being part of our photo review next month with Mark Green and the theme of seasons. I will work on getting this up onto our YouTube page at some point when I can get it from Mike and get it posted. So thanks
All
to
right,
everyone for
and
participating.
in the coming years, if you need me to come back, I have 3 other programs you can choose from.
Awesome.
All
Well,
right, cool.
We'll definitely consider it.
All right, guys, I'm going to take off. See y'all later.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thanks,
All right.
Thank
Mike.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Good night.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
You
Good
too.
night.
Good night.
Bye.